Hey girl, Marissa here. You are listening to the Codependent Dummy podcast. As a young woman, you have been raised, reinforced, and rewarded for putting the needs of others above your own. Now, in your 20s, you're finding yourself exhausted, exasperated, and enveloped in shit relationships, especially the one you have with yourself. Codependency is a way of being where we put the feelings, wants, and needs of others above our own in an unconscious attempt to meet our own feelings, wants, and needs. Sorry to break it to you, sis, but that is not sustainable. This podcast is to help you undo all that so you can stop playing small and start taking up space. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Codependent podcast. Today, I'm sitting with Harry Out. He is a social worker and therapist who lives in the indigenous territory of Dish with One Spoon, which is a wampum treaty with the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe. This is commonly referred to as the city of Toronto, Canada. Harry, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
All right, so we'll start with our typical two, Harry. First question, how do you define codependency?
Yes, codependency. So the way I kind of conceptualize it is how people have relationship with other people. Typically when I think of a codependent person or someone who struggles with codependency, is that they're really good at knowing what the other person needs and then kind of taking care of what that other person needs.
Right.
And over time, they've also kind of learned how to read the signs of what the person needs and really like hone down and be like, okay, I know you need this. Let me take care of this for you. Um, so so um so in the beginning, it's like really great, right? Like, okay, I'm taking care of your needs. I feel good about myself. And you're happy, and I'm reading your mind, and you've never had this before, and everyone's happy in that kind of relationship, right? Whether it is, friends or partnership, or family. But the hard thing that a codependent person really finds is talking about their needs and fulfilling their needs and wants in their life.
Right.
And they have a really hard time asking for it or even pursuing what they want.
Right.
So if you can imagine that, a person who's constantly reading and spending so much energy fulfilling everyone else's needs, and you only get more and more people in your life, right? You're kind of like, oh, there's this person now, and this person, I met this person, and you're constantly putting in that much energy into taking care of everyone else, but your needs aren't being met. Then over time, it can be a struggle. And what I do find with some people who struggle with codependency is that they feel kind of resentful and angry about what's going on.
Right.
They're like, okay, so I'm taking care of everyone else, but what about me? Why am I not getting taken care of? So in that relationship where that anger and the resentment comes out, the relationship kind of starts to change a little bit, and things start to be a little bit tougher. But meanwhile, because you aren't able to voice it, sometimes the other person really just don't know. So it can be a kind of a struggle for a codependent person to have healthy, balanced relationship with other people.
Right. Very difficult. Yeah.
For sure.
Typical question number two. Do you have a codependent relationship or experience from your own life that you can share with us?
Yeah, oh God. So many. Where do I start from? Yeah, definitely. I think maybe I can just start from the beginning and really talk about how I kind of learned codependency over the years. I think part of it is me being here as an immigrant, and witnessing a lot of things that went on with my family. So right from the beginning, I was kind of the older sibling, And I had a younger sister, and also I wasn't just the oldest sibling, I was oldest male, right? And not just the oldest sibling, but I also had a whole bunch of cousins, and I was the oldest one, and I was the only male. And
Mm.
typically in Chinese culture, like that male kind of responsibility that was drilled into me was you got to take care of everyone. But of course, there's also like very, very strong patriarchal undertones to it. But also the message is you need to take care of everybody in your life, and especially family. Uh, Along with that, I do believe that my mom also struggles with codependency, and I also watch my parents kind of not be able to voice their needs.
Mm.
So there's a lot of like guessing around, and people being upset at each other because nobody knew what the other person needed.
Right.
So there was a lack of clarity, and I also never learned how to express my own needs. Um, I just had nobody to learn that from. And I think over time too, you kind of get scared, right? Because you look at your parents, your family, and no one's expressing their needs, and you're kind of like, am I not allowed to? Um,
Mm.
is this something that I'm even allowed to do? So having all of that, I really learned to not talk about my needs, and I didn't know how to talk about my needs. And I think over time also taking on a lot of shame that like, oh, I have needs. Okay, no. Put that away. Put that away. You got to take care of other people. This
Right.
your needs thing is gonna get in the way of you taking care of other people.
Mm.
So I grew up, became an adult, and just started having all these like terrible, awful codependent relationships, like romantic relationships with people. And at first, I would be able to provide them with a lot of stuff and make them really happy. And then this pattern is I would kind of get resentful because my needs were being met, or that I feel frustrated that I can't voice it, even though I can, right? It's literally just
Right.
saying it, but I couldn't. Emotionally speaking, like there were so many things holding me back.
Right.
So so yeah, and then eventually I just ha realized that okay, there's a pattern here, Harry, and you got to figure this out because otherwise you're just going to keep repeating it over and over again.
Mm. Do you have a terrible, awful relationship memory that comes to mind as
Yeah.
a quintessential codependent moment, interaction, experience?
Oh, so like something that's just like, oh, okay, something clicked for me. Um, I don't know if there's an actual moment. But I think it was when I started therapy, that's when I really started learning about it. But I think in terms of like thinking about moments, there's even now a lot of regret around how I treated some people. Just because
Mm.
when you get resentful and angry, like that's not nice. Like you kind of drag people in kind of this shitty relationship where no one's happy. I'm not happy. They're not happy anymore, and eventually the relationship ends.
Right.
Well, sometimes it ends, sometimes it drags on forever. But for my situation, it ended. Yeah,
Yeah.
and for the people that I did out there, I'm really glad it ended for them because like, I'm just kind of like I was miserable and I was making them miserable, and I wouldn't want that for anyone in my life, at least not anymore. Back in the day, I thought that was how relationships were.
Right. Yeah. Terrible, awful relationship. So regret, lots of regret. And therapy helped you realize how terrible and awful they were.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Same for me. Um, I'm trying to think of an experience that comes to mind. Um, Terrible, awful. Um, I don't know. I feel like I've shared a lot about this on the podcast, but I remember I was with a guy, and gosh, I'm trying to think about like, because yeah, I definitely was codependent, but like the more terrible and awful aspects of codependency. Um, and yeah, I think I just remember like if so I was so codependent, right, with him. And then if and when he changed our plans,
Mhm.
I made him the most inconsiderate, selfish, unreliable person on the planet. Like,
Yeah.
how dare you?
Yeah.
I have been waiting. Like, if we had dinner plans and he was like, hey, I got out of work late, I can't meet up. I was like, I'm starving. And it's all your fault.
Yeah.
Like, I just, so again, I think it's so, just to highlight the irony of, of right, giving so much. You said you gave so much in relationships. You read your partner's needs. You provided a lot of acts of service. I'm, adding
Yeah.
language here, but and then we do eventually we don't turn into, but the awful and terrible parts of us and our codependency start to come up. And yeah, we really, really are regretful, are ashamed,
Yeah.
are embarrassed of what that codependency I don't know, like how it manifests like in our behavior. Your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. No, I relate so hard to the late thing because like I hate it when people were late. I'm like, we made the
Mm,
plans. Like you were supposed to be here at this time. Um, yeah, yeah, but like that kind of unspoken implicit contract that like kind of we made, but no one else knows, and we don't tell them. Yeah, and also like the guilt and shame around it. Yeah, and I don't know if you can relate to this, but the guilt and shame, like, oh man, like I feel awful saying these things and doing these things. So let me make it up to them by taking care of them some more. And then it just goes back into that spiral. It's just the
right.
same cycle. And I'm like, oh man, Harry, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. Implicit, unspoken implicit contract.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah. I think the contract really is, at least for me in my personal experience, was that I do these things for you, and eventually you're gonna have to take care of my needs. And you're gonna have to do the same thing, and you're gonna have to put in the same effort. And I get to grade you on that effort.
Mm,
Yeah, and I get to decide whether you're doing good enough or not. Um, which unfortunately is never enough because I think there's just something part of us when we struggle with codependency that we have a lot of insecurities and needs that we haven't figured out ourselves, and then we blame it on the people around us for not being able to take care of that, but they can't. If we need we have certain traumas or certain experiences that we held on to that's really hurt us in the past, we got to do it ourselves. There's
right.
really no way that someone else could do that for us.
Mm-mm.
Mhm.
Unfortunately. And fortunately. Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, so
Yeah.
fortunately the answer is in your hands, and that you can make the decision to make the change that you need.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, Harry, let's focus on some of your specialties. I I sense, yeah, it'd be helpful for all of us to learn, what does codependency look like in children growing up in Asian immigrant families?
Yeah, yeah. Oh man, it's a huge question, and a huge kind of thing that happens because let's say a family from Asia comes here. So I live in Canada, right? So let's say they come to Canada, and the child is growing up here, and when and let's say this child goes to school, 6 years old, goes to school, mom takes him to school, and then his friends at school make fun of his mom. And why is she dressed like that? Oh my God, why does she speak like that? What's wrong with her English? What's wrong with her? Why does she look
Mm,
like that? And then, this child is hurt, right? And then he goes home and tells his mom what the other children were saying. And he could see the hurt in her face. And then this child learns that, okay, mom's hurt when I tell her these things. I probably shouldn't tell her these things in the future. So he learns that he needs to start taking care of his mom. And then he goes to school. Maybe other children, continues to make fun of him and his mom. And maybe he fights back. Maybe he doesn't say anything. Whatever happens. But he knows that he can't tell mom. And then let's say parent teacher night, mom and dad comes, or maybe and maybe the child is there. So the child's there with the family parent teacher night, and the parents may not fully understand what the teacher's saying because English can be hard when you're immigrants and it's not your first
Right.
language. So the child might actually have to be the translator. You know, this child's like 6 years old and he's trying to figure out what's going on, and then he has to translate for mom and dad. And you know, if he's lucky, he might have a good teacher that's respectful, and would try to support him and would be respectful towards his parents. If you get a teacher who's not so great, the teacher might be very disrespectful, might be racist, outright racist, and the child can read that, right? The child knows that, look, my teacher's like frustrated and he's angry and doesn't know why. So the child is not given this big task of translating for
Right.
between people, and then also seeing that maybe this teacher is like being disrespectful to parents, seeing that, oh my God, like what is going on here? The child just knows that he's dysregulated, he doesn't feel good, he feels uncomfortable. But also this
Right.
sense of like, I need to protect my parents. Now, fast forward, maybe this child now is like 15, 16. And for years now, he's been taking care of his siblings. Parents are at work, 12 hours a day, immigrant parents having to hustle to make money, right? It's going to be hard to find a job here. If you don't speak the language, you struggle with the language, and it's going to be racism in terms of hiring, a lot of different things. So child now has been taking care of the siblings for a few years now, and is now thinking of maybe needing to go get a job to help the family out. And again, it's about the family. How do you help the family survive? How do you take care of the family?
Right.
Not about his needs. And then meanwhile, he's also trying to ace all his tests and do really well academically, because that's kind of the dream. That the American dream, the Canadian dream is you get your academics done, you go to a good university, and you make something out of yourself in a professional career, and you start making money, and that's how you achieve the dream. So he's carrying that dream for the parents, for the family. And that's also another thing. It's just like, wow, think of all the burden that this child is carrying, all the responsibilities that he's carrying.
Right.
So when he grows up into an adult, he's never gotten to think about his needs. And sometimes his needs might actually be flat out shamed, or sometimes his needs might actually be kind of in his way. He's like, oh, you know what? My needs don't matter. They're in my way. I need to take care of what's happening right now. I need the family to survive, to help the family survive. So he doesn't know how to have healthy relationships with people where he can express his own needs and actually go after what he wants. So in all the relationships that he builds, and it probably is going to be, somewhat codependent and always about taking care of the other person, because that's just what he knew. He knew, and he never knew anything else.
Right. So this pervasive, universal need to tend to care for, prioritize, sustain, support others.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a challenge. And when I talk about this, I can actually like see faces of my clients from different points, and not every immigrant child is going to experience the exact same thing, but there are elements of it for a lot of immigrant children where they can relate to or recognize in themselves.
And I'm hearing what it looks like in families, somewhat in school and professionally, your observations, Harry, on what codependency looks like in children growing up in Asian immigrant families, with friendships, dating relationships, like other relational dynamics.
Yeah.
You did
Definitely
mention dating, sorry, but
yeah.
socially.
Yeah. Definitely a lot of trying to take care of other people and taking on all the roles. So like let's say, if you're planning a trip with friends, you just do everything. And you have and this person may have a really hard time delegating tasks or telling someone to take on certain tasks. And also in friendship, always kind of really taking pride in taking care of other people emotionally, taking pride in people coming to them and being the confidant of other people. Yeah, but also kind of one-sided because they have a
Right.
hard time sharing their themselves with other people. And I think what's interesting is that when you can share your own vulnerabilities with another person, that actually deepens the relationship with the other person.
Right.
Yeah, but because it's so scary for codependent people to share and be vulnerable, because they've just learned so with so many years in their life that they've learned that they're not allowed to do it or it's shameful to do it, that they just can't. There's just so much emotional barriers around there. So a lot of the relationships can be kind of disconnecting, and they may actually not feel connected to anyone in their lives because they just can't share themselves to people.
Right.
Um, mhm, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that also kind of relates to like romantic relationships where that's kind of the perception of like, okay, now this is a romantic relationship, I should be able to share everything with this person. But then it's become such a big stake now, right? Because like now this person needs to be your everything, and no one can be your everything. And you kind of need to be a whole person. You kind of be a healed person for you to have a healthy relationship with another person. And that you don't need someone to take care of you, but you need someone to support you going
Mm-hmm.
through a lot of things in your life. Because you got to be able to take care of yourself as a whole independent person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. On the flip side, we have what you have worked with and experienced, narcissistic behavior.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So I'm curious, let's hear how you conceptualize narcissism, and then we'll get into how it relates to immigrant families.
Yeah. So for me, when I talk about narcissism, I'm not really talking about the clinical diagnosis of narcissistic personality disorder. What I'm talking about is a set of kind of um, behaviors and tactics that a person uses and has. And some of these tactics include, being very angry and defensive whenever they feel like they might be under criticism, or being very critical, blamey, judgy, shaming of other people, or being passive aggressive and guilt tripping people or backhanded compliments. And all of these tactics is really to take care of your own needs,
Mm,
because I think there is a relationship to codependency with narcissism, is that they both kind of is looking to get their needs taken care of in the way that they
right.
know how. And I think sometimes with narcissism, um, and with narcissism, what I do find in immigrant families is that a lot of times one of the parents go from being codependent to being a narcissist or having a lot of narcissistic behaviors because their needs aren't being met. So then they need to get it met in some ways. And I think we touched on this earlier as well about like, blaming the other person and shaming the other person. Hey, you're late. What the hell's going on with you? What's wrong with you? You're a bad person.
Mm,
Yeah, and like those kinds of behaviors to kind of make sure that, this person is never going to do this again, or that this person is going to make up to me and meet my needs. So I think
mhm.
it's kind of like it's kind of very related in terms of the two things, even though you wouldn't necessarily think of them as being related.
You wouldn't, but yeah, at the same time, I sense they are related, and we, yeah, codependents don't just sit in a codependent box all the time. When relationships are strained, when a loss of relationship is threatened, when there's some type of rupture, right? There's attempts to repair it that aren't always the healthiest.
Yeah.
And yeah, obviously, like if we've tried like all of our codependent behaviors to repair a relationship and it hasn't worked, we're going to start experimenting with guilting and shaming rather than adoring and unconditionally loving someone. So yeah, I think that it culturally, and I think in like the I don't know, therapy related content on social media, you would think that there's a sharp contrast.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I just would encourage the listener, and even myself, I'm like, let's just be open to we're just trying this on. Harry's saying that sometimes codependents like engage in or can even like change patterns towards like narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. I love what you're saying. And just for everyone listening, like I've had all these behaviors too, right? Like I've exhibited them, and that's why I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm really glad that the people that were dating me before when I was doing this, like I'm glad they got the hell out. And that, it was not pleasant to be my partner and dating me back in the day. I'm a lot better now, but back in the day, like it's not pleasant, it's not nice.
Mm-hmm. So, Harry, how does codependency in these children contrast to the narcissistic behavior in their parents?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think we can perhaps talk about why one of their parents might turn into or start having narcissistic behaviors. Um,
Yes.
and when I talk about narcissism, I'm not really talking about kind of the malignant narcissist like Donald Trump. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking more like covert narcissists, where they portray themselves and present themselves as like very benevolent, and they would do a lot of very like selfless and benevolent deeds to get people to think that they're really great people. And when I think of um, immigrant parents who come here, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to be immigrants, and it's a struggle to be parents. And when you have to be both, it's kind of like, whoa, like it's like a double struggle, right? So you come here, you're away from your support system, you're in a land where a lot of times you don't speak the language, and you have to figure out, how do I get citizenship? How do I get a job? And then you're experiencing racism, xenophobia, you're struggling with money, and then you also have to take care of your children, and even like finding a place to live can be challenging. Like everything and every day is just a challenge, right? And if you have a parent who is codependent and is trying to take care of everyone's needs, imagine how overwhelming that is to have to struggle this hard with everything, and
Right.
knowing that everyone in your family is struggling with all of this too and trying to take care of all their needs.
Right.
It's almost like a task that can never be completed. And it's hard to get satisfaction from that, right? When you can't really take care of other people's needs, when you take pride in that. So what happens is that this codependent parent, um, starts realizing that my needs are being taken care of, and I'm not happy trying to take care of other people's needs because it's endless. So they kind of like what you were saying, test out different behaviors and try out different things to see what can work to get their needs taken care of. Um, um, And sometimes this codependent parent might also be, be a subject of abuse, whether it's verbally or physically from their spouse or from family, their own family, or their spouse's family. So there's a lot going on here, and sometimes as a self-protection and also as a way to kind of get your needs met, um, you might one day try, hey, I found that if I throw my anger around at people, they back off. Or hey, when I shame people, they kind of do what I want them, and they give me the attention that I want them to. So you start trying these different things, and an example of this would be, maybe your kids come home, maybe this parent's kids come home, and they come home and they run to their rooms to go play games, and then maybe the parent, this narcissistic parent, might say something like, you know what, it's so great that I sacrificed so much for you kids, and you can't even come home and say hi to your mom or your dad, right? And then and then um and then the kids kind of feel ashamed, they feel bad, so then that they learn this behavior of like, okay, I go come home and say hi to my parents, and then this parent's like, oh, it worked, let me try that again next time. Yeah, and then they start doing it for everything, right? Criticizing, blaming, shaming, passive aggression, and then it just gets to the point where it's like, holy crap, like it's just nonstop. And then meanwhile, this affects the people around them.
Right.
They when they're kind of experiencing prolonged shame, um, they kind of like, their self-esteem is, they feel crappy about themselves. They always feel like doing something wrong. And also there's a level of gaslighting too, where like sometimes they're just doing stuff, and then all of a sudden they get shamed and blamed for something. So then they start feeling like, okay, I just need to listen to my parent and do whatever they expect me to do. And they don't think for themselves, because thinking for themselves means they're going to get criticized. So that can be really dangerous when they grow up and have relationships, because sometimes that leads to entering into either relationships where they get abused or relationships where they abuse the other person.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any memories, or have you heard of of either your mom or other parents? Like what was she like before the stress and overwhelm and mm, and stress that came with immigrating? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, have you heard about more of her codependent, her pre-narcissistic codependent behavior?
Yeah. It's interesting because some clients actually come in and say that they can they notice the shift. They can figure out the time of that shift.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like they say, yeah, it was around like this time, I was around this age, and then they could see things happening.
Wow.
And I think a lot of times it's kind of like the power dynamic changes. Maybe one parent has more power than the other parent, because when we're codependent, we kind of give that power up. We want to take care of the other person and allow the other person to kind of dictate some stuff, right? And then the power dynamic changes. And then they could also see very clearly that the relationship changes, in terms of who's speaking, who's saying things, and a lot of times the children, they see it, right? They're smart. They can see that there's a shift in how things are happening in their home. So definitely, like they literally see and be able to identify there's a time where, like, bam, yeah, this is the time, this is the moment.
Mm. Yeah. So just some awareness around, this is what it used to feel like and be like at home interacting with mom or dad. And then, yeah, stress, overwhelm, tension, racism, xenophobia, all those things.
Yeah.
And then like new patterns,
Hmm.
right? More related to narcissism.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely.
Yeah. Yeah. And any other thoughts on the contrast of the codependency in the children and the narcissism in their parents?
Yeah, I think sometimes the child also learns these behaviors when they see their parents, one of their parent exhibiting some of these narcissistic behaviors. Sometimes they also take it on. Um, and sometimes that's when they go into their own relationships where they are the ones that are doing it to their partners, their friends, and other people. And sometimes they go the other way, and they have been so used to the abuse and unpleasantness that other people can take advantage of that because they have a hard time speaking up for themselves. Because when you're a child, trying to speak up for yourself just leads to punishment, and you still need your parents to take care of your needs, so you can't really speak up. And as an adult, even though now as an adult you can, but you learn through so much conditioning that you shouldn't and you can't, and all this emotion comes up when you try to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
all this emotion.
Yes. Oh my God, so much emotion.
Say more about it.
Yeah. Uh, I think when I reflect back on the work that I do with clients, like the first thing is always to talk about how to identify and recognize emotion. Yeah, because what I do find is that most of my clients have a difficult time identifying their emotion. Um, and um, and a lot of times, like in their families, they were never taught that. And I don't want it to be like this is how all Asian families are, this is how all immigrant families are, but that if they come see us, it means that this is something that they struggle with, right? There's gonna be
Yeah.
a lot of healthy immigrant families out there that wouldn't need to see us.
Mm-hmm.
But the clients that come in to see me do generally have a hard time identifying their emotion. So we always start off with talking about, so how do you feel in your body? How's your breathing? Are you holding your breath? Are you taking deeper breaths or shorter breaths? Uh, does a certain part of your body feel tight? Are you hunched over? Is your heart rate kind of going like 1,000 miles an hour? How's your body feeling? And when we start recognizing that, then they can really come back and say, yeah, like I experienced this, and now I'm starting to be able to understand when I'm experiencing an emotion. Because you can't really do anything about it. You can't really implement strategies of helping you to calm down when you don't know that you're feeling the emotion.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay. What are some, let's see, what have you observed as the short-term and long-term consequences of this codependent narcissistic dynamic in immigrant families?
Hmm. Short term and long term. I definitely talk a lot about long term, but short term, I think short term is very much the same. Is that the relationship kind of repeats itself. It's the same pattern over and over and over again until somebody decides to break the pattern. Um, and um, and uh, and the hard thing is if your narcissistic parent continues to do the same behaviors and you continue to respond to it in the same way, then it's going to continue because it works for them, right? Your parents like, hey, it continues to work. I'm going to keep doing it,
Right.
and the pattern continues, and you continue to also exhibit very similar patterns in your other relationships. And then over time, what I do find is that when clients come see me, they're at a point where they're like, something needs to change. Um, and it's really difficult because and maybe this is something you can relate to, and I think a lot of my clients and the listener might be able to listen to, is that there's a real big emphasis on like family is everything. Family matters. You always put your family as priority. And I think culturally, that is part of our values. But then also it gets doubled down on when you're here, immigrants. and you're excluded from the rest of society. So what do you have? You just have your family, right?
Right.
So you have to kind of double down on it, and that's what your parents tell you. It is everything, and we have to stick together. So a lot of times when my clients come in, there's so much shame wrapped up in setting boundaries with their parents or changing the way they relate to their parents because they've been given this message that family is everything.
Right.
But the hard thing is, like, as a child growing up as an adult, they know that if family is everything, why do I feel so crappy? Why do my parents say these things to me?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that we're constantly, arguing and bickering and conflict? Like there something feels not quite right with the message, but then the message is constantly reinforced all the time as a way to say, hey, you can't do what you want because family comes first. You got to do what I
Right.
tell you to do. So this is such a heavy and ingrained message in a lot of my clients that it becomes really, really hard because the shame is so strong when they think about having to even just talk to their parents about what's okay to say and what's not okay to say to them.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And you start with helping them to talk about and identify their emotions, becoming aware. How do you feel in your body? What do you recommend for those starting to have these near almost impossible conversations, or setting nearly impossible boundaries?
Yeah. Um, I think sometimes it might start with non-family members, learning to set boundaries with non-family members, with other people in your life. The kind of the easier ones, right? And for some clients to come in, they already have that kind of dealt with. It's just a family that they need to figure out. But for some clients, this is literally the first time that they're thinking of, saying no to somebody, um, or saying, "Hey, this is what I need from you. Can you help me out with that?" And it's very small things, like even just asking someone to do something for you that you can do yourself. Like you're sitting there and maybe your friend is sitting over there, and the pair of scissors is close to them. And you just ask them, hey, can you bring me those pair of scissors? Can you get those pair of scissors for me? Like just small ask, right? Starting very, very small, and starting at where each person is at. And if that's something that you've already been doing and you are able to do it with with uh, a lot of the non-family members in your life, maybe we start moving towards your family. And I do a little bit of role play with clients as well, and also think about, like, how would your parent respond to this if you say this to them. So we really think about, like, strategically, how can we go in and have this conversation with them and think about how they will respond and how you can respond to it. Yeah, but it's really like practice makes perfect. So you just kind of practice it along the way, and it's really scary. And you start off with the easier relationships, and then you slowly move into the more difficult and challenging relationships, and you just kind of get better and better at it over time. And it
Mm-hmm.
and it gets a little bit less scary after the first few times, definitely.
Right.
Mhm.
Does an example from your own life or a patient come to mind for a more difficult boundary? Right. So they're the child in an Asian immigrant family. Family has been first their whole life.
Mhm.
They've started to come to see you. They're setting boundaries at work, with friends, right? They're saying, can you get the scissors? It's okay to have
Yeah.
someone get the scissors, even though you can do it. It's okay to ask for help. And they're like, okay, Harry, I'm ready to Yeah, what comes to mind for a boundary you've really seen someone attempt to set? Not even successfully. I'm just curious,
Mm.
like an attempt.
Yeah, yeah. I think there's for some clients, they literally just want no contact. Like I don't want to be in contact with my family. And then we talk about how that's gonna work for them. And then for other clients,
Mm,
they want to be in contact and we figure out like what works for you. You know, if do you how often do you want to go visit? Do you want to go visit every weekend or once a month? And these visits, how long do you want it to be? Do you want it to be a full day? Do you want it to be an hour? How often do you want to call your parents and be in touch with them in that way or FaceTime or so I'm figuring out how they want to do it, like in person, FaceTime, phone, and how long. And then also because we've been doing the emotional kind of being able to recognize your emotion kind of thing. Talking about how do you know when you gotta get going? Like, how do you know when you need to get the hell out of there? Yeah, because when you're all worked up, like it's not fun for you, and it's also not fun for the other person as well. And you're back into that relationship pattern. So that's when you know,
mhm.
okay, when I feel this, when my breathing is like this, when my heart is like this, when I'm hunched over like this, or if I feel pressure on my chest, whatever that is, maybe it's time to go and just excuse myself and come back maybe next
Right.
weekend or a month from now. Yeah, so it's a combination of figuring out what you think is tenable, and then also when you're there, being able to continuously regulate yourself and knowing when you need to get going when you're very dysregulated.
Mhm. I sense with codependence the unspoken implicit contract is I will stay no matter what.
Mm,
My heart is racing, my chest feels tight, my I'm starting to have a migraine. I will stay with my family, near my family, around my family.
hmm
And so you're really challenging. I mean, because we did stay when we were little.
Yeah, yeah.
and now as adults, you're helping your clients recognize, despite the same cues, which just before symbolized to you, stay here, don't say anything. mm, yeah, now they're really starting to symbolize the opposite. It's time to leave, it's time to say goodbye. it's
hmm
it's not helpful that you're here.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Other
To
thoughts on, go ahead.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to the contrast with my clients with ones who have narcissistic parents and ones who don't. Because like the ones who don't, when they see their parents maybe like a few times a year, they might not even live in the same city, and it's not a problem. It's not a problem for the parents, not a problem for the child. But then when you have the ones who have narcissistic parents, um, they may see them once a month and they're constantly being shamed by their parents for not seeing them sooner or not being supportive not being supportive enough or not doing things for them and it has I think sometimes it has very little to do with the actual like how much time you spend with them, but more is just that this is just who they are. This is just the behaviors that they have, is that they will always make you feel bad for the things that you do.
Mm,
And one thing that I really think is important for clients for me to discuss with clients about is what is the impact on you when you stay?
right.
What is the impact if you feel like you can only stay for half an hour and hang out with them for half an hour before you go, but you feel bad and you've spent the whole day? Then we talk about what's the impact for staying the whole day. And sometimes it's not just that day. Sometimes the next day they still feel like shit. Sometimes they may have an interview at like 10 o'clock in the morning, and then the day before the mom or the dad, they come in and they say these things to them. And then all of a sudden the next day at the interview, their mind goes blank and they're triggered still from the night before. And it's a long-term effect, right? So we really talk about what is the impact that you have with your dad or with your mom, who's a narcissist, um, and really look at, is this sustainable? Is this what you want to continue to do? Can you see yourself doing this 30 years from now, 20 years from now? And and if you can't, maybe this is the right time to make that change.
Yeah. And I'm hearing, at least, yeah, in the work that you do, some of your patients, there's like a continuum of options between keeping the connection the same, right? This is the status quo. Let's keep this. Let's not change one thing. And then the opposite end is or what did you say? Like cut ties.
Yeah, no contact. Yeah.
No contact. And right, I sense the power of working with you, Harry, would be if they do come in with a curiosity about, potentially landing somewhere on that continuum besides keeping things the same, then by, your help talking about and identifying their feelings, getting in touch with their bodies, implementing, right, setting boundaries with non-family members first, like really like just building all of this awareness, then they're able to like we talked about trying on behaviors. So trying on different boundaries and really seeing what the impact is on them and discerning, like redefining the relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think one thing is that we don't aim to change the behavior of your narcissistic parent, because you're not in charge of that. They need to be the one that makes the decision, right? Like like what you're saying right now, right? Like the ideal world is they'll just change their behavior and everything's healthy and happy and everything's good, right? Then you don't have to feel that guilt and shame of setting those boundaries. But we aren't in charge of that. And we need to do what we can control, which is how we set boundaries with them. However you feel is what will work for you, and move on from there and see how things work and just test things out.
Yeah. Final thoughts.
Final thoughts. Nothing that comes to mind right now.
So the final thought is we have to take ownership and responsibility for our part in relationships, and we have to accept the reality that it's not dependent on them changing, and we can't rely on that fixing everything.
Yeah. And I think also one thing that I always want clients to know is that you can be gentle with yourself. You can practice a lot of self-compassion, because some of the things that you've gone through, it's really challenging. And also, you are also an immigrant, just like your parents, and things are not easy, right? So practicing a lot of self-compassion, because the shame is what's normal. The self-criticism is what's normal. And we just simply want to, look at those parts of you with curiosity and why they're so strong inside of you, why these voices are so strong inside of you, and feel some compassion for these voices, because I think they kind of helped you survive through whatever you had to survive through, right? The shame was to get rid of your needs, because every time you express your needs, you were shut down and you were made to feel awful. And your inner critic was here to say, hey, you need to be perfect because you're going to get criticized. So start being perfect. So they helped you. These voices helped you. But then now that you're in a different situation, you're an adult, you're no longer a dependent, and you're no longer living at home, or maybe you're no longer in the same kind of relationship with your parents, then you can start making different decisions to help you heal from from some of the trauma and experiences that you've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hmm.
Well, thank you, Harry. Thank you so much. And what resource are you offering the listener today?
Yeah. So if you go on my website, Harry Owl Therapy, Owl spelled AU, so harryowltherapy.com. I do offer a resource. It's called the Asian Survival Guide. So in it, we talk a lot about like identity and figuring out who you are and who you want to be. And it's a few questions to get you start thinking and reflecting, and making implementations of certain things that you want to do in your life. So feel free to go grab the resource, and if you can, my email will be on there. Email me. Let me know how that was for you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I will put a link to that in the show notes. And as well, yeah, everyone's saying, or Harry just said his email will be on his website. So if you guys want to reach out. And thank you, dear listener, for being here. Thank you again, Harry, for coming. And everyone, we will see you next week.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Hey, girl, it's Marissa again. I'm not like a regular podcaster, I'm a cool podcaster, right? Thank you for listening and staying till the end. You can find me on Instagram at Therapy with Marissa. Email me, marissa@codependummy.com. Check out codependummy.com for more information on the show. And baby girl, a subscribe, rating, and review would be much appreciated. Till next time, I want you to remember, if you are feeling unseen, I see you. If you are feeling unheard, I hear you. And if you think that you don't matter, know that you matter to me. I want you to go out there so you can stop playing small and start taking up space, you dummy. And now, the disclaimer. Girl, this is not therapy and I am not your therapist. This podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regards to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, publisher, or guests are rendering any legal, clinical, or other professional service. If you want or need a professional, please